All right, everyone, welcome back to the Mission 300 podcast. Here is what we're going to go after today. We were talking a bit before about this idea of truth and how we get to the truth in our day and age when there is so much crap all around us from every angle that has this illusion of substance, but ultimately leaves you completely empty. So we want to know how we actually get to the truth of things. And to get to that, I want to start by asking Bryan and Tommy a question. So here's the question for you guys. What is one thing of substance that you know to be true, and how do you know it's true?
My immediate gut reaction was to state gravity, but I've been forewarned that maybe that's a little bit too simplistic. But the one thing that I know for certain, and one truth that I know, is that I'm a son of God. Now, the harder part of your question is, how do I actually know that? And I don't know if I've ever really thought that all the way through, to be honest with you. I mean, I have at one point, to the point where it became a belief within me that I know to be 100% true, but I haven't really gone back to explore that in a while, let's say. But I would say it's, for me, been a lived experience through many different experiences of knowing God as a father and then actually living that out. And that truth actually taking hold in my heart. So much so that it's now a truth that I believe with 100% certainty.
I agree. I mean, we've only been talking about this forever. I absolutely know God to be a good father. What I don't always understand is what's actually good for me and what I actually need. So some things change within that relationship that I can challenge at times. It's only because I don't know those parts of it, but I know him to be that. And I have too much evidence in my life that you'll never take that away. So that part I know to be true. And, like even when you're saying about gravity, you can't see gravity. You can feel the effects of gravity. You can see the effects of gravity. You can measure the effects of gravity, but you can't really say what gravity is. It's a pull. It's a force, but it's kind of interesting. It has its own measurable makeup. And when you are willing to step in and know God from a relational point of view, not a theological. If I lived in space with no gravity and you were trying to explain to me the measurements of gravity, I would have to intellectually grab a hold of that. Now you could probably still say, yeah, but it's measurable, but I'm just trying to make a case of an astronaut with no gravity, or not really the measurable effects are far enough out. You wouldn't understand Earth's gravity if you've never been on Earth. Like, you could say it's there, this is what would happen. You would have to only intellectually deal with it because you didn't experience it. So the experiential part is I've experienced the force of what God is as a father and the things that he's done in my life, that you'll never take it away because I've experienced that force. Now, I may not always be able to measure it properly, just like the average person doesn't know how to measure the physics of gravity, but they know it's there because they are experiencing it. Only an astronaut or someone who's in space and not experiencing gravity would have to intellectually explain it and use math to explain what that force would do. I think we've done that when it comes to this picture, and that's kind of getting off your question, Jason, but that's what I know to be true, that God is a good God and he's a good father. What I don't always know is what's actually good for me. So to measure what that is, I don't measure God's goodness based on what I want him to do. I measure his goodness because I trust that he knows what I need and what's good for me.
So let me ask another question, and I'll share the one that came to my mind when I asked you the question and didn't ask myself because it gets me out of it. But the thing that I thought of was, I know for certain that my kids are mine. Like, and not to get too descriptive, but I was there before they existed. I was in the process. And when they came into the world, I saw them. I knew they were mine. And I can look at them now and obviously know they are mine. They've got my mannerisms. They've got my forehead. They've got my eyes. They've got all these features and characteristics about me. I just know they're mine. There's no world that exists where, well, maybe one of them was someone else's. That's just not a thing. And it made me think of that, Tommy, when you were saying there was something about, I don't remember how you phrased it, but knowing God as your father, it like took hold in your heart at some point, like it kind of settled there. And it almost seemed like instead of an intellectual endeavor that you studied enough and then you agreed with, it happened to you. So it's almost more like something that happened to you because of something, as opposed to, well, I read enough books. And then at the end of this book, I checked all the boxes and now I know this is true. Does that make sense?
I think that's true to an extent. You also have to have someone kind of unlock that for you in a way. I think of like myself growing up, I kind of knew all the right things to say about Christianity. I knew all the right beliefs. I knew all the right things, but I didn't really know God as a father. It took someone, multiple things, sharing that idea of God as a father. But I don't think it truly became a belief that I knew for certain until action was taken upon that truth. It's almost like you don't really know something until you've actually done that thing. But I get like into a slippery slope when I think about that of like, there are things that we can just know because people have experienced them, right? Or for some, maybe it's actually just a limitation, right? I think of like the 4 minute mile, like it's not possible until it is possible. So it's like, what's the point? Like, what's that point of pushing? Do we really know anything until it's lived? I don't know. I'm struggling with that a little bit of the ultimate truth.
That's a great question. And part of this whole conversation started before we got on the podcast of just how we're living in a world in a time period where there is so much information. And much of it is the way we communicate it. It seems to be more making a case for why we're right about something on any side. I'm not even talking about a side. It's a case of why we're right about something. It's evidence to validate our opinion or our support our group or support our ideas. And we don't do it in a way that is debatable. Like we don't pose it like, hey, we discovered some evidence here and we can debate over how that evidence validates either side. We don't allow that debate to take place. We immediately absorb it to show how the other side is wrong. Even like when you listen to Senate hearings or we listen to a detective trying to get their case. Most of the time, have you ever noticed, like if a detective is just trying to gather information and they're not sure of who did what, they're just trying to gather information, they tend to be much more inquisitive to ideas. What's going on here? How'd you get there? What time did you come? They have these questions that aren't so attacked, but once they believe it's the person, like they know it's this person, they kind of have these quote unquote gotcha questions that they're trying to ensnare the person into to say. Like they automatically now know they're guilty. We just got to get them to say a few things. And so it's all these kind of gotcha questions. And I've come to the point I don't like the gotcha questions because the assumption is you have to defend yourself. And I don't care what side you're on. Both sides do it. Go listen to a Senate hearing. If the Democrats are running it and they have the person sitting there, or the Republicans are running it and they have a Democrat sitting there, it's all these, just answer my question, yes or no. Well, life is not yes or no questions. If I say yes to that, then I'm agreeing to all this other stuff, but there really may be a yes, but it's not this position you think I'm in. It's a different kind of yes. So I can't say yes because then I have to agree to everything. So I can't say no because then I have to agree to everything. So I want to explain my answer, but they don't want you to explain the answer, yes or no. And so I think we've created a just so polarizing that we automatically assume the other person's guilty of something. And truthfully, there is a lot of people that are like, you could see it, but it doesn't help us really get to the truth, where Jesus never inquired in a manner that was a gotcha. It was an inquire because I want you to come to the truth. I'm not inquiring for me to get to the truth. Jesus was never trying to prove himself. He was trying to help you discover the truth. So his questions were always inviting, or it was declarative. He would just declare something. And so I think we could take something from that, because we need to learn how to get to the truth. And I'll be honest with you, it's hard. This generation has the worst, especially when they don't trust any institution. And now we've hindered them because we don't trust any institution. And then we think a person with a Twitter handle that sounds like an idiot has the answer to this problem, and we're lost.
I was going to say that same exact thing. I think what we're seeing is we've destroyed the family so that an entire generation grew up without any foundational understanding of their father or mother. And if you don't even have the security in that core nucleus of life, then what can you really know? And then we look at our government institutions that are just clown shows at this point. Like you were saying, Bryan, congressional hearings are literally just stabbings at each other verbally to get clips with no substance to them. There's not even real consequences to them half the time. So what's the point of that? So you're growing up and you see the institution of the family unstable, can't really know what you're going to get. You likely grew up in a broken home anyways. You look at the institution of government, unstable, just a bunch of fighting. It doesn't matter what's true. You just score points by hitting the other side. And we wonder why people struggle to find the truth. We don't have those core things, then what do we have? And it's weird that we see this at the same time. There's this intense hunger for truth. Like we're on this ship and there's all these chains in the water and we want to know which one is holding the anchor. And so you've got to dive all the way to the bottom of the ocean, go link by link to see if the anchor is actually at the end of this one, or if it's over here, or if it's over here, because you listened to 30 different people on the boat and they all told you something different. So you either just pick a side and start arguing, or you have to dive into the ocean. But maybe there's, I don't know, a captain we could ask or something like that.
It's so concerning that even places that we normally would trust, it used to be a point where maybe you could trust your institution, maybe you could trust your teacher, maybe you can trust your local police department. Anything that had trust has been stripped. And now we're searching, really what we're searching for is the person that feels loved or accepted by a certain group, or they could find their place in it. That becomes the source of truth. And that's a dangerous place, because gangs function on this. Lenin building a nation. You get Stalin pulling a people together. You get Chairman Mao. You identify with a person's struggle. You find an enemy for them. You share that same enemy. And pretty soon that person becomes bonded to the ideology. And you nailed it, Jason. When we have stripped away the role of a family and the need of a family and the trust of the parents, it was never that the parents are always right, but the parents have a good parent has the best interest of their child. So even if they could be wrong about something, their words and everything are for the best interest of the kids. So yeah, you might find things that you're smarter than your parents, you will. But the objective wasn't to destroy the parents, that they were lying. They have the best interest. And that's the true bond. The truth is, this is my family. The truth is, you love them. You can't measure love. There's no science. You can't even say it's a chemical reaction in your head. You can't explain love. You can't explain sacrifice. You can't explain logically naturalistic science why someone would give their life for someone else, why a mother would do that. A good father, too. They're going to do everything to fight for the kid, even when they're wrong. And so that's something you can't measure. There's no chemical anything to say this is what we do. Uh, I guess you can. Someone will come up and say that. But if you've never experienced that, if you've never had that happen to you, you are going to be much more likely looking for some kind of naturalistic experience. But when you have walked and experienced that, when you have experienced a friend, like a brother, military soldiers, when they've gone to battle with each other, you can't explain how that bond is so strong. It's not it it it's not a chemical reaction. They're bonded. They're one. They know each other. They experience each other. You'll never break that, even if they disagree on truth. And so I think it's interesting as we're talking about this, the two pieces have to go together. The relationship and the connections that are beyond natural, like beyond like just a chemical reaction in things and an earth science and truth, because the two go hand in hand.
So both of you guys, Bryan and Tommy, have at various points in the history of our podcast and our relationship here have expressed that you know God as your father. Obvious statement of the century. I'm very proud of myself for that. How do you explain what that's like to someone who is at that I just want truth point, but they're so obsessed with the with getting there intellectually, getting there logically, getting there through reason, that they almost don't know how to pursue the relationship because of those are two different things.
Well, I would say the first thing is I had to step beyond an intellectual relationship. When your life hits a painful reality and you invite God to come into that reality. And I don't believe we should always build our relationship with God on a painful reality. But the truth is, until you hit a most vulnerable point that you actually need some kind of help beyond what's there, that is the perfect invitation. And so in that moment, when all of a sudden you have a knowing about things and you begin taking steps and let's say you're reading scripture or you're reading something and it stands out to you and you just try it and you just and you start working it and you start seeing the nature of God, you start seeing the function of God and you start walking those things out and then they start working. That becomes part of your DNA. It's like you could talk about meat or whatever nutrition that you're going to have, but until you actually partake of it, let it become part of you and continue that process, then you could say, I have felt the effect of this kind of food versus this kind of food. And isn't this what Jesus said? Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. He's comparing eating to words. Like he's comparing physical nutrition to words, that these are actually more important and you feed on them. And we've talked about that before in other podcasts. Well, when you do that and you decide, I'm just going to give it a shot and just abandon myself to what the word of God says and trust he'll guide me in that, all of a sudden you start changing. You start letting go of things. You start becoming something different. Transformation starts taking place. You become less fearful. Once you experience that and you continue in that relationship, it's hard to believe anything else. So you could never you could lay out a billion pieces of evidence to say God is not your father. And I'll just still say, well, I still believe it. Like you'll never unbelieve me in it. Like and get me to that's not a word. Unbelieve me. You'll never strip it out of me because it's become a part of me. You'd have to rip a part of me aside.
I think all that is true. And it takes almost a humbling of there will always be things that you don't know or are impossible to know in this lifetime. And despite that, I think there's more reasons to believe in God. And once you believe in a God, right? Believe in something, a higher power, whatever, then exploring which God is that and testing that. Because I would say the God of the Bible, if you read the Bible and explore and do what it says, it'll prove itself true. I've seen that in my own life. Like the verse, I talk about this verse all the time, and it's just because it's changed my life. Whoever claims to live in him must walk as Jesus walked. And you start to unpack that, like just walking like Jesus walked, like just read the stories, read the parables, and start living those out. It's impossible to prove God as a father. Like I can't see it once you start walking it out. There's so much evidence that is built not only in my life, but in the lives of believers before me, that it just is so true to me.
You know, it's interesting as you're walking it out in the evidence and people still say, yeah, but, and they'll come up with 100 reasons why you can't believe and why it's not true and why you're reading the wrong translation. And don't you know the evidence says this and that can't take place in the Bible because this took place. And it's interesting if you really sit back and just bring a set of logic to it. We know there's things that go on if you're just a naturalist, no God, let's just say naturalist, no God. You know there's things that function in the universe for it to work that are beyond your way of measuring. You can't measure it. You have to assume it. There's things that just have to be assumed. Dark matter has to be assumed. Gravity has to be assumed. Certain forces have to be assumed. How things are formed have to be assumed. There's processes. There is no absolute to how those processes are done because you would not have a study of the origins if we already knew the origins. If we knew how it worked, there would be no study. It would just be, this is how it works. So why in the scientific field of just natural science is there a science of the study of the origins if we already know how they originated? Like, why do you have that? So just the fact that there's a science of the study of the origins, that there's a study of archaeology to see how things were, how they were dated, means we don't fully know what took place before, right? Is that a fair assessment? All right. That means you're always learning new things. Now, if there's nothing to learn in doing that, why would you have a study of it? Because we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. So we're in the process. So to be definitive about this could not take place in the Bible and say this couldn't, and you have one side so lock solid, then you have the other side trying to take another piece of evidence to say, see, it has to be this way. I think we're still approaching it wrong because we're trying to do natural things to prove this relationship God wants to have with us. Throughout history, there has not been a mankind that hasn't believed in some kind of realm outside of this realm. Throughout history, there's another realm outside of this realm, this natural realm we live in. So unless we were stupid when we made the pyramids, so unless we were absolutely stupid and some of the empires and the kingdoms that were built, we were just a bunch of morons that now we're evolved into brilliance today. Okay. So unless the intellects were stupid 1,000 years ago and now we're super smart, why did they believe in other realms? I'm not saying it was a right realm. I'm not saying it was a truth. I'm just saying, why did they believe in other realms outside of our natural world? Because they knew it was there. They knew there was things that were beyond what we know, right? Okay, just the fact that humans have done that means you cannot base our whole existence on just naturalism. So to come to me and say, There's no evidence for God. There's no evidence that any of the things that were written in the Bible are true. I mean, just think about this. One thing we do know, we know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are true, were written. The evidence, the documentation, there is more evidence for those books existing, functioning, and the truth of them than any other single literary thing throughout history. Like, we did a movie on the Odyssey, and we don't even challenge whether the Odyssey was written or not written. And we have a couple manuscripts, and we have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Okay, forget the coordinating of the whole Bible. I'm just talking about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, just those simple books. We know they experienced something. They knew God, like when John says, we looked upon, we handled the word of life. It wasn't like the experience with who Jesus was rocked their world, okay? Not natural. So my point is, does that make it absolutely factually true that everything that was said is evidentiarily true? I would venture to say that you don't want to believe, and you think that until God proves something beyond your brilliance, it can't be true. So then I'd venture to say you think you're God. So you do believe in God, and you're it. Because somehow, unless these measurements hit your brilliance, and then you'll say, yeah, but this is science. No, you don't know anything more than what was told to you by a professor, told to you by a study, told to you by someone else. You've never gone and done the study. You've never gone and done a soil sample and seen for yourself how the fossils actually were formed. You have to take the research of someone else and trust them that this was true. You're always forced to trust someone. And so you're trusting ones that are giving you the things that make you feel like you know something. You're gathering evidence to make your case versus God is not trying to prove himself, and he never has. God's never tried to prove his existence. But the enemy's always been afraid of him. His own people didn't even believe in him. Yet the enemy's always believed in him. The fact that he's the center point of what we're trying to disprove is just amazing. And you can go look from Darwin, had a horrible experience with God, and therefore he lives a life disproving. You can say Nietzsche. Actually, Nietzsche has some good insight to things, but his father was a Lutheran pastor. And he went away from that and began challenging it. You have all these people that had these experiences that affected them, and therefore their research, their evidence, the things that they focused on, brought out things that say, oh, I was hurt there too. So then we bond to hurts. So I would say most of our truths that we bond to are things that help us put a salve, is that the right word, salve, on our hurts. But truth doesn't necessarily salve your hurts. It causes you to step out into something else.
I would even add to that, as we've talked about before, there's two different approaches to these, I want to find truth, and these intellectual endeavors. There's the honest pursuit of it, and then there's the obsession and the insecurity of pursuing more information because you think you'll be fulfilled once you find the next answer. And once you have the gotcha answer to this thing that's debated. And you have this hole that you're trying to fill with information and intellect, and it never seems to get full because you're filling it with the wrong thing. And I know how cliche that sounds, but when you understand what a father is and who God actually is, all those things take care of themselves. There are answers. The world is incredibly complex, and it's freaking awesome. And it's more than we can hope to understand in our lifetimes or my grandchildren's lifetimes. And that's great. And we can pursue all that because he made all this for us. And in that aspect, it's an awesome pursuit. But so many people are trying to look for answers because they're looking for that fulfillment or that father to be there. And so this person, this scientist becomes that father figure because they're so confident and so sure and so stubborn in their opinions, and they won't let go, and it connects with you emotionally somehow. So you latch onto them, and that becomes your guy, and whatever they say is gold. And you're just led down this messy path.
Yeah.
This made me think of like all of that is I think what we're all saying is true and is good, and there's so much there to unpack, and there's this like, okay, how do we find out what is true, right? But then are we also seeking the truth honestly? And how do we do that? The reality for me is I can know something is true but not trust in it. Like I can know that bridge is structurally safe or this building is built sound. But do I trust enough to walk over that bridge? Do I trust enough to work in this building? And so I think as we're talking about, like, how do I find the truth? It's like, how do I find someone that I can actually trust to bring me the truth? And it goes beyond like the intellectual, right? Because I think I know a lot of Christians who know the truth, but don't actually trust in it. I also know a lot of, let's say, people who aren't quite up to that Christian standard that might not know all the truth, but the ones they do, they trust and they believe in it. And that for me, like those people for me are the ones that are there. I don't know how do you say it? Like those are the people I'm drawn to, right? I see people on social media and let's say they cuss up a storm and they talk about all these things that are like, I don't know if you should be talking about that. But I can recognize that they've built the trust that what they believe is actually true. And I can follow in that footstep. So I guess my question to you guys is like, how do we find like what is true? I think there's a lot out there that we can find truth, right? For everything we've talked about, there's truth in that. But how do you find something that you can trust in, or how do you find the person to trust in that?
Let me ask, just to clarify, you're saying that there are people on social media that you can trust even though their mannerisms or behaviors might not be a good thing?
Like there's people I know that don't have all their lives together in all areas, but in areas that matter, they do.
Because you've seen it on social media?
Yeah, there's people in social media, but there's also people in my real life that, I mean, they cuss up a storm, but I know their belief is truth. Like their belief is in something true, and the fruit of their life is shown in that. And it's real and it's raw. And it's not like a fake, like they know everything. They know all the truths, but the ones they do know, they live out and actually act on, and the evidence is there. It's almost like this. Do we get into this like point where it's like there's almost too much truth? Like there's too much that I have to know to be true versus just trusting in? Like, is there a point where I can believe God is true, but not have everything figured out and trust that God has this figured out?
Well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean like you could believe that God's real and he's there and he's assured your salvation, but you just don't know how centrifugal force works exactly?
I mean, I know how that works. I mean, come on. That's
what I mean. Like, cause it's kind of a general thing. I'm trying to nail it down a little more specific. Like,
Bryan, we've talked about this in the past. Young Earth, old Earth. I have no, is that going to hang me up? Like, I don't know what is true, but I trust in God, and I trust that if there's a young earth, that's the way he made it. And if it's old earth, I can trust in God the same. And ultimately that truth does not really impact my faith, let's say, because I've seen so many other truths that I can trust in, that some of those things don't matter as much, but they might matter to other people a lot. So that's where I get hung up on this, is like, how do you find this truth? But then how do you start to actually trust now in that? Because we live in a world full of ChatGPT, AI, things I see on social media aren't actually always that true, right? And it's scary, right?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. I want to not just be another person throwing out a bunch of opinions on this. I think you said something first, is ultimately the thing that we trust comes from someone we trust. So once we find the someone that we trust, and when I say trust, it doesn't mean that they're even trustworthy, but they may share an ideology, they may share a similar pain, there's something common that we've kind of bonded over. Now I tend to trust what they have to say because of the relationship. I think, Jason, you brought that up, is, we have such a breakdown in family, and now our professors and the kids in school or whatever, you make a friend and they're just devout to something. Well, you really trust that friend. You tend to be easily bent, to, if they're very persuasive, to just kind of roll with the idea because you love the friendship. So there usually is a person that's much more bonding to the truth that we believe, or something else. Like, I love reading books and I love hearing the stories, but just because someone says it in a book doesn't mean I automatically go, oh man, this has to be true. What I get from the book is, wow, this experience to them was true. There's something to that. So it doesn't mean that the actual thing is the truth, but how it affected them, it was true to them. And so I think there's a lot to learn from that. The one thing that just really stands out is, back to my point with, we know certain books and certain characters have evidence. There's evidence and manuscripts to show they were truthful. No one was really challenging their truth. And you got like Peter. And I was just thinking about 2 Peter chapter 3. And this was really profound when I was reading it, because do I trust Peter? Here's the question. Do I trust Peter? Well, I kind of do. And if you're Catholic, you would have to say yes. True? Right? Because he's Peter. I don't look at, they actually built everything on Peter, but the revelation of who Jesus was that he saw, we build. But I trust Peter. Even Peter, who was humble enough to say, man, some of Paul's writings are tough to understand, but it's true. He actually validates Paul. See how this is like one person is validating the other, and the humbleness to say, man, he says some hard things, but it's true. In other words, I'm still trying to process it, but I know it to be true. Why? Because Peter knew Jesus. So because Peter knew Jesus and was personal with Jesus, he knew his nature, his character. When he heard words, he could hear going, I could hear Jesus saying this. It's true. It shares this witness. I don't understand it, but man, there's something about it to be true. And I thought it was interesting in 2 Peter chapter 3. I'm just going to read this real quick because I think it fits what we're talking about. Is, beloved, I now write to you this second epistle to stir up you in your minds by way of reminder, that you may be mindful of the words which were spoken before by the holy prophets, and of the commandments of us and the apostles of the Lord and Savior, knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last day, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willfully forget that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of water and in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with water. But the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment, perdition of ungodly men. But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. The Lord is not slack concerning his promises, as some count slackness, but is long suffering towards us. That was for you, Tommy. Not willing that any should perish, but all should come to repentance. Isn't it interesting that Peter is actually addressing some people are disproving God and the coming of Jesus based on how the world existed? Well, it's not changed in a billion years. This cannot be true that's coming, because here's the evidence. And Peter is saying there was a flood. There was a catastrophe. How the world was before the flood is different than after what the world was after the flood. And you say, well, yeah, but there was no flood. You know what? I don't care what you're going to say about that. I'm going to just say Peter is defining that he's dealing with scoffers that were saying the same thing. And what was the reason for the scoffing? To disprove the credibility of what Jesus said. The whole thing was to prove these words aren't coming to disprove a fact. They're coming to disprove the credibility of who God is and who he said he was. So when we're hearing people say, yeah, I just don't see evidence for that, the question is, are you trying to disprove the credibility of God? Or are you trying to just discover something that we don't understand? If it's that, I'm with you. Let's go explore. I don't know. I don't know how this works. But if it's to discredit the credibility of who God says he was and what Jesus said he was going to come and do and his heart towards us and his nature, then you're just doing it out of spite. And that's the category. You're either doing it out of spite or you really want to know. Which one is it?
If someone is seeking genuinely, how would you guys recommend they start to go down that trail?
I would start by reading the Bible without all of your pre-assigned prejudice. When you come across something that goes, well, I don't know about that, just put it aside and keep reading. Keep reading. See the story all the way through. See it all the way to the end. See what was established. See what was abolished. See what was fulfilled. See the purpose of the whole thing. What is the purpose of the whole story? That we have these characters and legends that went before us that didn't quite arrive, but they saw something. Why? Because God is redeeming mankind. Why? Because man fell. Why? Because there's an enemy that doesn't want you to know what you are. The enemy's been after and challenging. Did God really say that? Did God really say that? The first thing that's brought up, the first temptation, did God really say that? And it wasn't why? Why was it challenged? God doesn't really want you to become what he thinks you could become. He's holding out on you. So you challenge the credibility of the one that's speaking over your life. And
not to interrupt, but isn't that the exact same thing? Religion's just holding you down. This Christianity thing is just holding you back from the life you could really have if you just accept that God's not real.
And what's that life? And I will say, certain religion becomes without the life of God, and it's holding you back from the life. And it adds tradition. This is the way we do it. Well, yeah, I know it says that, but it's not really relevant to today. I mean, it's not just an atheist speaking at it. Our biggest problem is within our own circles, because we didn't experience it. Therefore, it can't be true, so I'm going to teach how it's not true anymore. You be in that long enough, you'd almost want to become an atheist. Like, you guys don't even believe anything that you say you believe. You're just theologically smart about something. I'm going back to, if you want a relationship and to know God as a father, you have to start with the first premise is, what do you think about me? And let him start speaking to your heart. Forget words for a moment. Let him actually come in and comfort your heart. And then just start reading. Start with the book of John. Read it. Just read it. Don't have a pre-idea of anything. And anytime the pre-ideas come, just put it aside. Just say, I'm just going to accept what this is and walk in it. Then go back and read. And pretty soon you won't be trying to prove evidence. You will be experiencing his nature, his character, who he really is, the most loving, merciful God. When you read the whole story, I mean, come on, you cannot read the book of Jonah and say God's just a mean God. People are mean. People are the problem. I mean, I could sit and go hours upon hours, but I'm just trying to, that would be trying to prove my point. I don't want to prove my point. I want you to experience that experience of take the time, read, let it sit, let every hurt, every bitterness, just be honest about it. Sit before God and say, I'm so angry at you. You betrayed me. You let me down. I tried to trust in something and you failed me. And he will probably start revealing to you that it was never him. That wasn't his nature. That wasn't his thoughts. Those weren't him coming. But you're going to want to blame. But you also have to take a little bit of a moment to step back and say, you're not all that smart. If you're going to sit and say God's not real, who created everything, and you're going to argue that point, that means you're God. So my question to you is, why do you have all these hurts if you're so smart? Why are you still jaded if you're so smart? Where's your mercy? Where's your kindness? Why do I want to listen to you when you don't have kindness, you don't have mercy, you don't have any of those characteristics? You're not believing in God because you don't think he has those things, yet I'm supposed to believe in you when you don't have those things? You just made your point. Your interpretation of God is your interpretation of yourself. But if you can humble yourself and say, I'm wrong, I don't know what I don't know. Show me. Man, what a journey that is. It's awesome. And then once he starts showing you, you'll never undo it.
Tommy, from your experience, did you come away? I know this is backtracking a couple episodes, but did you come away from the last couple Man versus Wild events with more questions and more confusion about God, especially the trail that you guys just did? Did you come away with more confusion and more questions and more uncertainty having gone through that? Or was there something that more so just settled in you from it?
I would say every experience with our Man versus Wild programs have settled in me what I've been wrestling with during that time. And I've never come out of like one of those experiences with more questions, more doubts, more insecurities or uncertainties. I always come out knowing God is my Father. That is the truth. And then walking that out from there. And I think it's just amazing how God can speak to those insecurities, those things that cause us to doubt when we actually challenge them with the truth of the Word of God. Just like you're saying, Bryan, like if you can't humble yourself, then you have to come to terms with the fact that those things are just true for everyone, right? Like, but I mean, you have to be able to admit that you are not right and that there's something greater that you can strive for. Not saying that you will be great in all things instantaneously, but there is someone greater who can walk alongside you in that. And I think that's the power of like going back to community as well, is like those doubts, those insecurities, those things, they get exposed at a higher level when you're doing challenging things. But then to see community, others going through that same thing and speaking to you And I think the biggest thing I've learned from doing these events and even just community in general is like, we just live in such a me-centric world. Like, it's all about me. Everything's about me. What I do for work, what house I buy, what car I drive, what I eat, it's all about me. But when you switch that to it's about us, everything begins to change. Like, me going and keep pushing through the trail isn't about proving it to me. It's about like creating a path for others to follow. We write down things that we want to hear from God, what we want to believe is true. And often those things are for other people. And the thing that's on your heart that you're wrestling with, that you need God to speak to you, that's a gift for others to receive. And I think that's the benefit of community in that, is that you can start to see truth in the people that you trust around you when you're doing life together.
You know, Tommy, I think one thing as you're talking, there has to be some sense of, first of all, there's something far greater than what we can naturally, like just in physical, material, substance life. There has to be something far greater than that. And our heart craves it. So whether it was done appropriately or not, that is why, I mean, you have all sorts of different religions. So I'm not going to sit and argue what the rights and wrongs of them, but there's something in man that craves and knows there's something beyond what they are. There's something beyond nature. So whether you believe and they're goofy or whatever, and I'm not validating them, I'm just showing it's the heart cry. There's this cry to know that there is something beyond what is now. That's too much in every human's heart to just be, how come evolution hasn't just washed that through? Like, why haven't we just evolved out of that? I mean, animals don't do it. Animals don't create altars. They don't create a place of worship per se. But at the same token, when you're on the trail, it's not because we're teaching you this stuff, right? You set the trail, and we set some questions to kind of ask and ponder, but you're kind of dealing with yourself, and it starts revealing your weakness. The reason someone can't do the trail that we bring isn't because the trail is evil. You can't just say, well, we couldn't do it because the trail's evil. It's so unjust. It's not fair. I don't believe in the trail. I don't believe in that mountain. It's just mean. No, it's because it's exposing what you are is why we don't like the trail. It's exposing what you are, why we don't like the mountain. It exposes your weakness. So it's much easier to sit and intellectually say, going on the trail will hurt your shins. It's bad for your back. It's harmful to you. It causes destruction. There's things on the trail that are not right. It's bad to go on trails. And I'm sure there's podcasts to show why it's bad to go hiking. I'm sure someone has come up with something, how it hurts the lower lumbar of your X vertebrae, so you shouldn't do it, and it causes your blood sugar to go bad. Like, someone's come up with some reason why you can't go on the trail. You can't face the mountain because it means that they have to face themselves. So we don't do it. So we come up with reasons not to face it. But you can't say the trail's mean. Who you are to the trail is the problem. Who you are to God is what you have to face. It's not proving God exists. It's you have to face, who are you when you meet God? When you stand before him, is he to you what you've been told about him, or is he to you because you picked up the Bible, asked him questions, and just read through? Or have you heard about what people have said about that book in the Bible, and therefore you base your faith on what someone said about the book? But if you sit and are being honest, I have seen absolute atheist young man, so bitter, so angry, so lost, sit down for the first time in jail, open up the book of John, and discover I have a right to become a son of God. Radically changed. Why? Because God, the word spoke to him. He grabbed a hold of it. It became evident. You don't need any more evidence. I don't need evidence of who my parents are. I know who they are. I don't need evidence like that. I need to know. I need to know that I know. Even a cop with the best evidence found at everything, he could not definitively tell me why the person did what they did. Even if they have all the evidence, he cannot prove what they did unless they say why they did it. Evidence does not prove motive. It doesn't prove heart. It doesn't prove anything. Just evidence. But when you sit and know him, man, it changes you. All of a sudden he can be honest, and now you can navigate with him all the information that's out there. What do you think? Show me the truth. And you know what? Here's one fact that I know. I know for certain. You want to know what I know? Is that I don't know. And the more that I know, the less I know. But I know the one who knows. So the things I need to know, I'll know. And I'll know it well. But even that, I'm humbled because the more I know of that, I need to know him more because he knows. That's what I know.
Any other closing thoughts, gentlemen?
It's powerful to know the one who knows. And to come with an open heart is one of the most important things. When I think of all the Man versus Wild events that I've gone to, or even other events that I've gone to where I've changed, it's because I've come with an open heart, and I feel with my heart the truth that is being shared. Then I begin to walk it out. I think of the first time that I truly heard, that my heart was ready to hear that God is a father. It was a truth that I was so hungry for. I was craving it, and I wanted to hear it over and over again. And I just needed it. It was something so true that I know with certainty my heart was hungering for that truth. And there's just like a certainty in that. And I hope for every believer that when you hear that, you don't put up the rails, you don't put up the guards, that you actually take down those barriers and let it actually sink into your heart. And I think that's exactly like what you're saying earlier, Bryan, about when you're going through the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, all these things, and these doubts come up, these lies come in of, oh, I can't believe that. You need to put them away. Open that heart. Because that's how you let truth seep into yourself. Then you go and do from there.
And if I could add, you can easily just put it, one thing to go with that, Tommy, one thing I recommend, because I don't want someone just read it, believe it, and don't interact with it. There's a rustle that needs to happen to settle things. It's okay if you come across something and just say, Father, I just can't believe this. Something's off about this in the story. I just can't believe it. Put it on a shelf. Don't do what you say. Don't just say it's not true. Just put it on a shelf. Say, show me more about that, and keep going. He will, and he always does. And the thing that you need to take from it will be brought out. And over the lifespan, you'll read that passage and find 9,000 million things that you could take from it. And each time it's like this onion, you'll be like, oh, wow, I didn't see that. Wow, I didn't see that. It will never stop. It's constant. So that's my encouragement is I'm kind of cautious saying, don't just blindly go, oh, it's 100% the truth. Here we go. And then we get into dumb arguments. We've got to cover our head a certain way. And we get lost in technicalities of stuff. Read it as the story written and these people sharing their lives to you about things, and then put things on a shelf going, I don't fully understand that. That's all right. But your heart still, teach me though, teach me. And don't go turn to Grok or to Gemini or something else to get what the answer is to it. You're going to go wrong, deeply wrong, because all you're going to hear is some other man blathering about their opinion of that subject. You're not going to hear what the truth is. The Bible will reveal itself. It will speak the truth, and it will bring you to what you need to know when you need to know it.
Good stuff. Well, we're going to wrap it up with that. I just want to leave you guys with really two things here. And I hope this is an encouragement, but understand that the world is full of people who are just insecure and angry and will argue against whatever you believe just because it gives them this moment of reprieve from their emptiness. It's like an alcoholic looking to get hammered just to escape the misery of their life. And sometimes the worst thing you can do is to go drink with the alcoholic because they want company. And it's the same way when we get into some of these arguments. But some of us also are just in these places of genuine searching, like, I just want to know what's up with this thing over here. And man, that is awesome. That's fine. Because one thing I know is that God is not like, I was really hoping they wouldn't ask that question because I've been hiding thousands of years from someone asking that question, but this person's finally asking it and I don't have an answer for it. God's not like that. He's a father who is going to walk you through these things. If anything, we're going to come to these places where we realize our minds cannot comprehend everything that God did. Spoiler alert. That's just the way it is at times. But he's going to be patient with us in our searching for it. The Father loves it when his kids ask questions about the world he created for them. I really believe that. And I appreciate you guys being here. Until next time, keep the faith and stay in the fight.